You're very welcome back. During the last year, we've all been forced to become more tech savvy. Our next guest is suggesting that we should use these skills very wisely.
Yes, this is the perfect time to combine our newfound IT skills to record and investigate what he terms as a family history. Shane Lahan. So a family tree is one thing, but a family history, is that totally different?
Well, I think so, I think family trees are like the royal family with their lineage going back to see who you're related to. For me, the secret is in the word history, because the word history contains the word story.
Yeah.
And it's grand to have a list of names and dates and so on. But when you hear about the people behind them and you hear the stories within them, and that's my sort of suggestion, that's what we should be looking at. Especially now, because look, everyone's kind of locked up for another little bit.
Yeah.
Why not use the time, especially when people are still alive, when you have relatives. For example, I would probably know the names of my grandparents, or I would know at least 2 of them or 3 of them and so on. And most people have no idea who their great-grandparents are. So if you have a grandparent alive today, they're going to know their grandparents.
Yeah.
And this is the opportunity to gather and get that information. I remember when I was a young student going to college, I was 18 or 19, we had one of those parties, when all your aunts and uncles come over and everything. And we sat down, and I'm so delighted I did it. I got out a piece of paper, and as they were talking, and they were talking about so-and-so and one of the Americans and so on and so forth, I wrote that material down. I had no interest anymore about it. And I always say to people, it's from the time you have to actually start wearing glasses is about the time you start getting interested in genealogy.
That's actually a very good point.
You have no interest between 20 years of age, 30 years, 40. About coming into your 40s, going to your 50s, I'd say people start getting interested.
Well, you start looking back, you start appreciating, you start, I suppose, really realising that the life lived before you, and especially if you have kids as well, I think
they start asking questions, and all of a sudden, what's kind of embarrassing when you don't have the answers yourself, Shane.
That's it. But that piece of paper that I wrote down those things, there was no Zoom, there was no recording.
We all have phones now, Shane.
That's it. Yeah. But that piece of paper was so valuable. And that's what I'm saying, Nora, is that if the kids get involved, the parents get involved, and we make some store of knowledge now, that down the line that information will be so useful for so many other people, I remember that day, and it was very interesting. I remember that day writing down, one of my aunts said, there was one of the Yanks came home, one of the Americans came home, and the story was they opened a small little suitcase and there were 4 bars of gold inside. And they closed it up again. And that was a story. And I'm still searching for those 4 bars of gold. There's a sort of an incentive for this family history business,
Speaking of family history, we can look at a fam chart. Tell us about this.
Yeah, so listen, you might say to yourself, I'd say, I'm Lehan, I think, my family is all about Lehan. It's not. If I go back to my mother's name was Ryan, her mother's name was Barry, and so on and so forth. So what happens here is that, I'm Lehan, but there's also I'm Crummy, I'm Ryan, I'm Barry, Haw, Duggan, Carl, Wynne, just all of these names. And if I go back 3 generations, there are 16 people, only one of whom is called Lehan.
Yeah.
So if I'm tracing my family history, I'm not tracing the name that I carry with me now. I'm tracing all those other people without whom I wouldn't exist. Any one of which wouldn't be there.
Because it's your maternal side as well, because obviously taking the father's name, so that with the maternal grandparents going back is where we lose it.
That's just as important. I mean, again, that knockover from the lineage sort of thing, the primogenitor, all that sort of thing. We need to kind of expand this out. So I love that as well, because it associates me with different parts of the country. So I have relatives now, for example, in Roscommon, my beautiful, the Crummies. And of course, when Roscommon are playing Mayo, I'm shouting for Roscommon. Why? Because I'm a part of that. We have relations in the County Limerick, as my mother would always say. She'd never say Limerick City, we're in the County Limerick. And you know what? I've gone back there. I've done my lineage, and what's interesting, I've done my history. I've gone back and I've walked down the avenue which belonged to my mother's grandfather. And you know what? I got totally overcome emotionally. I went back, I had reclaimed, this is a part of where I came from.
Yeah.
And I just got, it was tremendous.
It's like that movie, or there's the show on TV, Who Do You Think You Are?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a little bit of that there, isn't it?
Yes, but that's what we're doing, and that's what everyone...
Where do you start, though? Where do regular... Of course, you're a man who'd know where to go, but the rest of us...
Well, I think what's really important is that people... And it's a really good idea that maybe we should do record people who are alive today.
Yeah.
And if we are on Zoom and if we're on, even on the telephone, you can ring somebody up and you could take down some notes. But if you could record them, great. I found, which is really good, if you're good on Zoom, if you have 2 or 3 people together, because let's say you've some first cousins and you've got an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent, whatever. They jog memories, and someone comes up with something, and all of a sudden the story comes back. And there was the second thing I would suggest to people to do is to get out the old photograph. The suitcase of photographs under the bed long ago. We used to pull it out, and there was all these photographs, but there were photographs of black and whites that nobody knew who was in them. I photographed. This is my mother and father's wedding day.
What year was this, Shane?
This is back in the 1950s. Okay, and what's interesting about it is that I would know my aunts and uncles, but I would never have known the other generation. And none of my grandparents were alive when I was born, okay? But I look at that photograph now and I know all of them. I know them intimately. I know Auntie Kittens.
Hardly anyone could know that, Shane, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't even know some people in probably my parents' photo. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But what happened is when my mother was alive, because I knew I didn't know, I got her to identify them. And that's what I'd like people to do just now.
It'll save you a lot of hassle, Shane.
Take out the black and white photograph, and if somebody is alive who can identify it, it's really amazing. Now, I've got one great story about one photograph that I found. I had one relative, my grandfather's grandfather, okay? This is a photograph I found in my father's papers. This was a man called Billy Duggan, okay? Billy Duggan lived to 112 years of age.
112?
He was a super centenarian, okay? I was so delighted. He was born in the year 1803, right? And he died in 1915. He was born in the Napoleonic era. He was alive when Daniel O'Connell was winning Catholic emancipation.
The famine.
Through the famine, 1845-52, the land leagues, the Wyndham Acts, right up to World War I. He was alive, right?
That's very unusual in those days.
I was so delighted that I found this photograph in my dad's papers. I used to be showing it to all sorts of historians and librarians, and they said, this is fascinating. We were down in Kilreely, down where the great Shawnee Connell, the storyteller, is. Maura, my partner, looked up on the wall and she says, isn't that your great-great-grandfather? And I looked. The photograph I'd been showing everyone, the photograph that was up there.
Showing off.
Yeah, wasn't my great-great-grandfather at all. It was Shawnee Connell, the storyteller. I lost him completely. And not only that, I was embarrassed. Brilliantly, absolutely fantastic. I was looking at a book on Kilnamartyr by a man called Donald Murphy at page 149, who reappears, but my great-grandfather.
This is the man you spoke about.
So I got him back.
How did the mix-up like that happen?
Well, the mix-up is I made a presumption that there's this old man inside. And can I tell you one of the reasons? I had a look at his ears, and the hands have very big ears, right? And I said, this has to be him, right? And Shawnee Connell had very big ears, obviously. But so does Billy Duggan, the real Billy Duggan. And out in Kilnamartyr, they still say, if you live as long as Billy Duggan.
Did he live a long time?
He was a man, he's
so
115-year-old.
The photographic evidence was wrong.
Photographic evidence was wrong. But getting him back, Maura, getting back that photograph means the world. That's up on my wall at home, And I'd say that longevity is there, I'm delighted to see that.
Are there websites that people could go on while we're all in lockdown?
Oh, listen, there are thousands of websites. And there's all the big websites out, like the Ancestry, Find My Past, My Heritage, all of that. Let's leave those aside for a moment, okay? They're all very useful. But the wonderful resource that's come online over the last 10 years or so is the census. And the census is just magical. Most people have looked up people on the census, okay?
It's very exciting when you see them, when you find your own family, Shane.
Yeah, but I have to say, you have to be very careful how you look this up because you can get very frustrated. You're in O'Shea, right? So you spell it in the Irish form. Nearly everything is put in the English form. I was looking up some of your family recently just to see where I could find them. By the way, sometimes I thought they were avoiding all sorts of things. They were trying to stay under the radar. Maybe they weren't filling out the official forms, But I found out that they're not O'Shea's. You're put in as Sheas, S-H-E-A. So it takes a bit of time. The spelling of names, Maura, you're Duran, but there's D-I-R-R and D-E-R-R, and then it could be O-Duran. You might put an O in. So anyone looking up the census, you need to be sure of your search terms that are there. What I love about them, it tells you whether people spoke Irish and English. A lot of people spoke only Irish.
And what did you find out about us?
But from memory, I think your great-grandparents would speak only Irish, which is kind of interesting. The other thing is that a lot of people weren't literate. Sometimes they weren't able to read and write. And what happened is they would put down their mark, And even still, an X. And sometimes, though, many people could read and write, and they would sign their names. And what I think is really lovely about that, even if you don't have a photograph of someone, you actually have their handwriting, their signature. That would be my great-grandfather, Timothy.
Lovely writing,
And I'd say he was quite proud of having that.
There's a Y in there, Shane, as well. Even the spelling of the surname there's a Y.
The Y, the Lehan, could be L-E-E, could be L-Y, there mightn't be anything. But what I love about that is, that's a relic of my great-grandfather. He made that mark, and I have no other touchstone of him, but you get it on the census. There's also, in the 1911 census, there was 1821, 1831, 1841, right up, but they were all burnt. We only really have major 1901 and 1911.
Was that because of the Civil War? Part of the Civil War,
the burning of the public records office. But one of the things that happens is that in the 1911 census, it tells you how many children were born and how many were still alive. So quite often you have the mortality of children within the family and all that.
I'd say it was high.
Yeah, it was. It was very, very
People
high.
had a lot of children though, didn't they? And then they could have lost maybe half of them sometimes.
But you get families living together. You get situations where you have people marrying in because maybe the mother had died. So you get a father marrying a sister, and then you're having children by then. You have all of that detail. So people should take a look at the census. The best part of this is a thing called Griffith's valuation. Griffith's valuation was a valuation of properties. And what happens is they align the census material to the maps. Now, Ireland has the most extraordinary maps. Okay, we have the most beautiful ordnance maps with all the townlands on them. And what happens is that if we go back to Inishmore and we go back to Killaney and we look at the Durans and we can specify exactly the house that they were living in at the time. And that's magical because it's making a connection to place. Now, I want to say one thing. This is really good. I might know where my family came from. Okay, I might know the townland name. By the way, there's a great website called townlands.ie, and you can put in the townlands and you can find out exactly where they are. You can look at the maps; they're wonderful. But in my family, people out in Inchigeela, I didn't know, but I remember a name being spoken about in the house when I was young, and it was a school called Tureen na Lower. And it was just when I was going through the list of all the possible places associated with my family, I knew it intuitively, not from any document, but because it was in my head from memory of what was spoken in the house in the past. So this really amazing stuff. The other really good one I love are what we call the petty sessions, right?
Petty sessions.
The petty sessions were like court cases that were taken for all sorts of misdemeanours. I know my own family, the Ryans town in County Limerick, they were leaving hearse and cars in the middle of the road all the time when they were off inside in the pub drinking and so on. That was it. Or there was another one, he had a firkin of butter which came back from the market. A firkin, the barrel of butter.
Yeah, that's called,
and the small barrel. And what he did was that the other fella's barrel looked a bit better, so he robbed the other fella's barrel, and he got brought into the petty sessions for that. And there's also the account of dog licenses, which I think is absolutely great. We have all these records online.
Even back then?
Even back then. So I think they were collecting dog licenses every year. So we actually have a record of every dog, every family, and what dog. Donnie, I looked up your family, okay? Ballylushkey, you were saying, is the townland, okay? And just to let you know, in 1908, your grandfather, Dan Shea, he paid 2 and 6pence for a grey collie. A grey collie.
Never know that.
It's a pity that they don't actually, include the name. But you can go through all of the different dogs and all of those different things.
Oh my God, Shane, we have to leave us there.
We do.
We'd actually give all day listening to you. We'll have to come back.
But listen,
we will, because a lot of people out there will just love this.
Let people take the time. We're in the lockdown.
So start with the census, what Shane is saying. Anyone can go on and look.
That's it. Go for it.
We'll put all those details up on our website as well, and up on our Facebook page.
Well, that would be very handy.
Thank you, Shane.
Thanks, Shane. Competition time, of course, today.